Joining us now on the Shining Wizards Hotline, he is the host of What Happened When, the Alabama Dream, the two-time podcast champion of the world, Something to Wrestle with's very own Conrad Thompson. Mr. Thompson, how are you tonight?
Man, I'm great. Thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk a little wrestling with you.
We appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule. How are things going in the Conradison?
Man, things are great. You know, we're right here at the end of the month, and that's always kind of crazy in the mortgage world, but we're WrestleMania season, and I'm loving every minute of it, man. Bruce and I have been doing shows seemingly every weekend and getting to meet some of our listeners, and now I get to come on and talk to you guys. It's a good day for me.
That's right. I love it. I love the enthusiasm. Talk about, you said you were nonstop all week. Again, it doesn't seem like it's slowing down at all. What were your thoughts on this past week in professional wrestling leading up to the Rumble weekend in Philly and what actually went down? A lot of stuff went down this weekend.
You know, I haven't had a chance to see everything during NXT. I was at the ECW Arena preparing for the show, but I did get to see most of the Rumble. I saw the actual Rumble match for the men forward. I guess I missed the first hour or so, but I really liked it. I know it's getting sort of mixed reviews, and I guess that's what makes being a wrestling fan fun right now, is you get to sort of armchair quarterback some things and debate some things with your friends. But by and large, I thought it was a really, really good show. I felt like I got more than my money's worth, and I thought they left us with a nice cliffhanger at the end as for what will we see next with the women's division.
Yeah, and it's up in the air, and it's a great time to be a wrestling fan. And you mentioned the ECW Arena, Philadelphia, this weekend. We were actually in Brooklyn last Friday to see your live show with Eric Bischoff. You didn't really put a bow on it, as you guys would say. Are you going to do a podcast with him?
Yeah, he challenged me to do a podcast, but I'm not sure that he really wants to. You know, I only want to do the big shows, and I know that sounds funny, but I want to do something that I feel like is going to be good content, and it feels like a lot of times he's been very guarded and safe, and I'm not sure that he really knows what he'd be signing up for with a podcast from me, because I wouldn't let him just BS his answer. You know, I want to push for an answer, and if he gives an answer, I want him to defend it. I want to understand why and how, and it seems like a good idea in theory. But as they used to say, Eric don't want none.
No, definitely. And when someone had asked the question if he would have signed HBK if he had the opportunity, he said no. I thought he was full of shit.
Yeah, he was. And if he was to say that on a podcast we were doing together, then of course I would say that. And he also, you know, when I sort of indicated at that live show that I felt like him challenging Vince McMahon was not in it was in the book of bad ideas. He sort of questioned why I would say that, and he challenged me and said it was a good idea. And to me, you know, good ideas in wrestling are the ones that draw money, and I don't think anybody has ever accused that angle of drawing a dime. It didn't increase television ratings. It didn't sell any more tickets. It didn't sell any more pay-per-views, and he may like to say that it does, but he was promptly getting his ass kicked at that point, and he didn't ever recover. So it's hard for me to say that was a great idea, but when he's the guest on our show, and as, you know, JBL reminded us, they're for free, I didn't feel like I could necessarily hold his feet to the fire. But if we're doing a show together, then I'm going to make him stand on the truth, and that would be uncomfortable at times. And one day, if he really is man enough to step up, then yes, I'll do it with him. I don't know that it would be the longest-running show, but, hey, I did Ric Flair podcast twice. They don't have to last forever.
I'm glad you mentioned the Ric Flair podcast. How did you get involved? I've talked to you many times on Twitter, and you're just a fan. But man, you are living the fan's dream, man. You're doing podcasts with Ric Flair. You're doing 2 unbelievable podcasts with Pritchard and Tony Schiavone, and you're getting, you know, face to face with Bischoff. I mean, yeah, you held your own. It was impressive. What's the whole experience been like for you?
It's been crazy, man. It's a happy accident. I never expected to be involved in this in any way. You know, I became acquainted with Ric Flair through J.J. Dillon and a variety of other guys, where I actually helped sponsor the old Barbed Wire City documentary, which was an ECW documentary that was funded through Kickstarter. years ago, probably 5 years ago. And if you made a certain level donation, then an old ECW talent from back in the day would come to your house and give you a private screening of it before it was released. And I was such an ECW fan, I thought, this is awesome. So I did it. And then they said, hey, do you want Shane Douglas to come to your house and watch the show? Of course I do. So Shane Douglas came over, and a dozen of my friends were there, and we watched the old ECW, story together. And then we got to sort of pick his brain. And from that process, I guess sort of the podcast became a thing because once I realized, hey, that was kind of cool, one of the buddies who was involved in that was 1 degree separated from a person writing a book with Jim Cornette. Dave Milliken, he used to make the belts for WWE, is really good friends with me, and at the time, he still is, with Mark James, who was co-authoring a book with Jim Cornette. So he sort of soft-pitched it to Cornette, and Cornette said, yeah, I'll do that. So Cornette comes over to the house, a dozen of my buddies again. We watch old stuff, tell old stories, laugh and joke. I sort of pick his brain. And so eventually it gets around to where I'm 1 degree, like J.J. Dillon and the Steiners, and eventually it gets to where I'm 1 degree separated from Ric Flair, and he's booked somewhere in Georgia. And I realized, wait a minute, this just fell in my lap, and he's going to come to the house and tell old stories, and this is awesome. So we do it. We pick, I pick his brain. We trade numbers. And about 2 weeks later, there's a big football game on, and he says, hey, kid, are you going to this game? And I said, yes. And he said, oh, stop by after. So I wind up hanging out with Ric Flair one Sunday watching football. Time passes. He gets an opportunity to do a podcast with CBS, and he said, hey, I know you advertise your mortgage company on the radio. Would you be interested in sitting in with me on my first podcast and just asking me fan questions just so I can sort of get a feel? He really wanted a podcast partner, but at the time that wasn't really happening, and CBS didn't really want him to have a partner. But I sat in with him the first day and asked fan questions. He dug it, I dug it, and we kept doing it, and here we are.
That's absolutely amazing.
That's like the textbook definition of a happy accident. That's like
it all started, as crazy as it sounds, with me funding an ECW documentary, not solely, just making a contribution. And then from there it became, well, hey, Cornette's going to be right up the road. Let's get him to do that same deal. There won't be a documentary involved, but who cares? Slowly but surely, it sort of became a thing. And so me sort of asking the tough questions and pushing for answers had been happening, in private for a long time. And so when there was an opportunity for us to sort of push that out there for everybody to hear with Something to Wrestle, I thought this thing is going to blow up, and this will be exactly what wrestling fans like me really want to hear. No disrespect to the shoot interview guys out there, but we don't really want to know who are your influences getting in the business and how'd you grow up in the business. We want to know, hey, what did Vince McMahon say when so-and-so screwed that up in 1988? That's good stuff. And nobody had ever heard it. And Bruce Pritchard was made for podcasting. And, man, it's just grown faster than we ever thought, and it's just really been a happy accident.
Yeah, and we had him on a couple weeks ago going into the Brooklyn show, and I asked him if he felt that he got everything that he wanted out of doing the podcast, and he said that he not only has he gotten everything he wanted out of it, but so much more. And I'm wondering if that – like you said, you weren't supposed to be in this business, yet you got into it. Has that – fulfilled like a desire for you? Have you gotten everything you wanted out of the podcast, or is there more for you?
What's crazy is the whole idea behind the podcast was to sell mortgages, and it's still selling mortgages. But the whole idea was Bruce and I started working together. We hit it off, and he was doing some marketing stuff, and I said, hey, man, help me with some of these concepts. I was working through a lot of different landing pages at the time, and that would require some video production. And I knew he had a ton of experience with that, so he helped me with some of that, and those landing pages were hugely successful. They worked really, really well. And so while we were shooting them one day in our downtime, we're in my couch, and I turned to him and I said, hey, man, what happened when? And what came out of my mouth next was something I didn't even really care about. I was just curious about when the Radicals jumped from WCW to the WWF. And he told me an hour-long story that when I first asked the question, I didn't ever anticipate that I would want an hour-long answer. But when he finished, I was riveted, and I said, this is a podcast. And so it sort of came to my mind right then, hey, instead of me paying my local TV stations and my local radio stations, hey, how much would it cost to put a commercial on your station that X amount of people are going to hear. I thought this right here is going to create an audience that is much bigger than I can just go by in my local markets. And I could put my mortgage commercial in the middle, and Bruce, that would be a way for us to make money on a podcast. We don't even have to sell any advertising. We could just do this. And he was, it took a little while, but eventually I sold him on it based on what I was paying for other advertising, that this could be significant value. And so we're still promoting the mortgage company. SaveWithBruce.com is the place to do it. And Bruce and I are still doing mortgages together, and we're happy to do it. And that was sort of the idea. And so when it starts to pick up some steam and people are like, hey, we want you to do a live show at WrestleMania, we're like, what does that mean? Like, how do you do a live podcast? A folding table and 2 microphones? Well, yeah, that's what it is. And to my surprise, people are into it. And the T-shirts grew and the live show grew, and now people are paying to be on it, and they're giving us awards. Yes, it has far exceeded all of our expectations. I knew people would dig it, but I never imagined millions of people would dig it. That blows my mind.
It's so different than any other podcast that's out there, and it's different than the shoot interviews where they do like the, Sonny's telling everybody who's got the biggest ding dong. Nobody wants to hear that. People want to hear.
Well, they do. In fairness, I buy all those shoot interviews. I read all that stuff. And I know the one you're talking about in particular, and let's just call it out because it's great. Sean Oliver has done a phenomenal job with kayfabe commentaries. Now, the product you're talking about is U-Shoot, but the thing that they have done that is second to none is their timeline series. I think it's some of the best stuff out there. They did some on the NWA and WCW and ECW, but the WWF timeline series, I think, is gold and should be in everyone's collection. I know that DVDs are becoming more a thing of the past, but you can do digital downloads now. I don't get a hookup. I'm sure I could. I pay for them every time, and you should too, because that timeline series, if you're a wrestling nerd like I am, like we are probably, that timeline series, man, that stuff's gold and worth every nickel.
Now, when you talked about doing a live show and your I guess not your reluctance, but like curiosity and how that works, when you started doing live shows, you have a bunch under your belt now. What do you prefer? Do you enjoy the live interaction, or do you prefer the comfortability of just you and Bruce shooting the shit?
Well, it's 2 totally different animals. We had a promoter reach out to us in time for WrestleMania last year and said, hey, we want to do this. And they told us, how many seats it would hold and how much money we could make and blah, blah, blah. And so Bruce and I were both like, listen, we'd like to try this, but how can we make this as big as possible? So we started to think about we could invite surprise guests and not advertise them, but tease it. We could tell some stories that we wouldn't really want to put on the podcast that anybody could just listen to at their leisure forever and ever, amen. And then I had a silly, funny thing in my office here where I have everyone that was a salesperson in my office here had a cartoon head drawn. So it really is just a silly caricature, and I have one for every salesperson. So I thought this would be funny. Let's get one for Bruce, and let's put them on sticks, sort of like Pardon the Interruption on ESPN. And now, instead of just having Bruce do the silly impressions of these different wrestling personalities, now we could have a visual representation there too, and that might make it funny. So we put a bunch of heads on sticks and took our act on the road, and we were both kind of curious about what to do, and so we worked through a really long format, and it was very structured. And as time's gone on, we've realized that's not as necessary for the live show as it is for the taped show. The tape show, there's no crowd interaction. There's no laugh track. And so live, you sort of call it in the ring a little more. Yes, you have bullet points and you have an idea of what you're going to talk about, but by and large, you're trying to give them more of what they're digging. So if they're loving Dusty's impression, well, let's do some more of that. If they're loving some of the dirty underbelly of the wrestling business and stories we can't tell, well, we'll give them more of that. You don't have that instant feedback on a taped show, though, so I can't say which one I prefer more because they're so totally different.
And if you're going to the Elimination Chamber in Las Vegas, February, go to notarib.com. The Saturday before, the 24th, the House of Blues in Las Vegas, 6 o'clock start time. Tickets start at $31. So you're going to get to see Conrad, Bruce, a special surprise guest. I'm sure they always come correct. And you'll get to experience the live podcast, which is unbelievable.
Yep.
Like I said, we got to see it Friday in Brooklyn 2 weeks ago, and it was awesome. And then if you're not in Las Vegas, you're not going to the Elimination Chamber. Kevin, this is right up your alley. They're doing something with the Florida Panthers on March 17th.
Yes.
Boxofgimmicks.com. It's a 2 o'clock game. You get the game, and then afterwards, Something to Wrestle with podcast. You guys are.
Now, let me tell you about that one too. This is kind of fun. The Edmonton Oilers are coming to town. It's an NHL show, and they're doing something cool for St. Patrick's Day. So if you get the upgraded ticket, you can get the cheapies if you want, but you should spring for the big one, because if you get the big one, they're going to have some catered food for you there. But my favorite part of this, I can't believe this is real, unlimited beer, wine, and soda.
What?
Now, giving a wrestling fan unlimited beer does not sound like a good idea, but we have convinced these guys to do it. So you're going to, for one low price, get a hockey game, get a live podcast with Bruce and I, and all the damn beer you can drink. It's not a rib. Go to boxofgimmicks.com and pick up your tickets right now. Spend St. Patrick's Day with us.
Next time you come back east, I gotta reach out to my New Jersey Devils connections, and we gotta get you something with them.
I would love that, man. I love that idea.
And we are on a time crunch, and I do want to let Conrad go. I know he's a very busy guy. Before we let you go, Bruce, you do the podcast. I hear the cans popping. What are you crushing?
Coke Zero. I know that's killing kayfabe a little bit, because we've had Miller Lite on intermittently talking about their fine product. And it is still my favorite beer, and I'm not being paid to say that. I've just always been a Miller Lite drinker. However, we always drink Coke Zero. There's only been one instance where we ever actually drank beer, and it was WrestleMania 15. It was right when we had just been contacted by Miller Lite, and we thought, this is the coolest thing ever. We should actually drink beer. So we did. But every other time you've heard the cans pop, it's always Coke Zero. There's never an exception to that. It's Coke Zero on his end. It's Coke Zero on my end. And if they would pay me some money, I would say that it's Coke Zero on the podcast as well.
Is that breaking? Have you ever told anyone that before?
We've talked about it a little on Twitter, because there's been some accusations from Vince Russo and other folks that they're actively drinking on the air, bro. Yeah, we are. Soda. We're not. I mean, you would know in a 5-hour podcast, if I've been sitting there crushing Miller Lite for 5 hours, I'm going to be a little slurred at the end. I'm not Andre the Giant. I mean, I may have him close in weight, but I'm not Andre the Giant. I would be a little tipsy at the end of a 5-hour drinking marathon.
Fair enough. If you're listening to this live or in podcast form, Something to Wrestle, What Happened When, Conrad just dropped on Monday, Bunkhouse Stampede 1988 with Tony Schiavone. Last Friday, Royal Rumble 1988. This Friday, the main event from 1988. Conrad,
can I talk about those shows a minute? Is that okay?
Please.
Absolutely.
The Bunkhouse Stampede 88 is something I've wanted to cover for a long time, and I feel like it gets overlooked as one of the most important shows in history, because it really is the first time that Jim Crockett Promotions had a fair shake at pay-per-view. And they had sort of hinged their entire company on the expansion of Watts, moving to Dallas, getting those television networks, developing this wrestling network property, but most of all, selling pay-per-views. Because when they started to negotiate with some of their top talent and to keep them going north to Vince McMahon for greener pastures, because he did have the action figure money, which people were hearing JYD was making $200,000 a year just from royalties from that alone. They couldn't compete with that. So they said, here's what we're going to do. We've got the clearance from Turner. We're going to do multiple pay-per-views a year. If you go north, you're only going to get one pay-per-view payoff with WrestleMania. We're going to string together 4 or 5, so you'll make way more money with us, not because we'll have anything bigger than WrestleMania, but we'll just have more frequent pay-per-views. So he put guys on contracts where they had guaranteed contracts, but there was a way for them to just have it paid as a balloon payment in the end. So you would see through the course of the year, the Midnight Express, who may be on a $175,000 guarantee, might be making $4,000 a month, which is way, 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 way low of what they've been guaranteed. So Turner had put Crockett in a position to where they had all their eggs in one basket, and they were thinking, hey, this pay-per-view is the holy grail. And, of course, we know what happened at Starrcade 87. Vince McMahon squeezes them out, invents the Survivor Series, goes to all the cable providers and says you can't do a doubleheader. You've got to pick one, and if you pick them, you don't get WrestleMania. All but a handful of cable systems fall victim to that. So instead of selling hundreds of thousands of pay-per-views at Starrcade, they sell 20,000 of them at $15 a piece, and they only get half that money. So they they only earned $150,000 when it probably cost them more than that for satellite time and production. So it's a total washout. This pay-per-view is their chance at redemption, and it's the worst piece of crap pay-per-view you've ever seen. You've got to watch it. Bunkhouse Stampede. And by the way, this Friday, Something to Wrestle is going to cover what I believe is still the greatest angle in the history of professional wrestling, the best piece of business ever. Even Dave Meltzer said it couldn't have gone any better. It's the main event from February of '88. It's most famous for what you remember in the main event, but I think so many people forget that earlier in the show we had the now infamous angle with the guitar and Honky Tonk Man and Macho Man. Yep. There's only 2 matches on the show, but can you imagine 2 bigger matches where all the rumor and innuendo is that Honky won't drop the Intercontinental title, so they pivot, and instead of the $1 Million Man becoming the world champion at WrestleMania 4, it becomes Macho Man. We're going to cover all of that, and of course, the famous and superbly done twin referee angle, and the debut of maybe the most beautiful belt in the history of wrestling, that Winged Eagle World Championship we all identify so well with Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man and Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. It all debuted at this same show. It's a great time to be a wrestling fan if you listen to those podcasts. It's WHWMonday.com if you'd like to hear about Bunkhouse Stampede, the beginning of the end for Jim Crockett Promotions. And, man, when business went to another level, it's the main event. It's Friday noon main event at somethingtowrestle.com.
Conrad, we're going to let you go real quick. Just hearing you talk about professional wrestling, it's clear that you're so passionate, obviously as a fan. What's the end game? Would you want to work for WWE if they called you?
You know, the trouble with that is, man, I'm doing, this sounds really tough to say, but I'm doing really well doing mortgages, and I have for a long, long time, and I've done it for 17 years. And podcasting wasn't a thing 10 years ago. It won't be a thing 10 years from now. I'm a big fat-ass dude. There's no way they're putting me on TV, and even if they did, it would pay less than what I make now on my real job. I'm not going to roll the dice chasing a dream when I have hundreds of people who depend on me to do what I do in the mortgage business. So if I can't do both and I've got to pick one, I'm going to stick with mortgages and stay a fan forever. So I don't see me ever doing anything with WWE, but I don't hope that that excludes Bruce or Tony or anybody else from fulfilling whatever their wrestling dreams are. Clearly, we're on WWE's radar. Clearly, there are going to be opportunities, and I want everybody to be happy and do what they want to do. But I'm going to do mortgages forever and ever. Amen.
Awesome.
Conrad, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. Give Conrad a follow on Twitter at Hey It's Conrad. He's super interactive with fans. Conrad, anything before we let you go, friend?
That's it, man. I'd love to help you save some money on your mortgage. I know we didn't get on here to talk about mortgages, but if you have a home equity line of credit, I do encourage you to take a look. Trump's new tax law means you can't write off any of that interest. You probably have an adjustable rate. You probably have an interest-only payment. You probably have a balloon payment. So a home equity line of credit kind of sucks, but now you can't write off the interest. It really sucks. I can help you. Email me directly, conrad@onefmc.com. Give us a call at 888-425-0105, or just hit us up and talk to me and Bruce at savewithbruce.com.
Awesome.
Conrad, thank you very much. We look forward to having you back in the future, and we look forward to more live shows in the New York, New Jersey area.
Man, I can't wait to get back there. I'm hoping we'll be back up there this August, so come see us.
Sounds good. Conrad, be well.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.